Hi guys, Terry here with another video, and it's an actual video! An actual review! One I have been working on for weeks, if not, I think months maybe, between reading the book, writing the review, which I struggled with doing like I always do with Anne Rice's books, because I want to make sure I get as much as possible and talk about in depth. I'm going to sit back a little bit. Talk about as much as possible and all that good stuff. I still struggle with it, not to mention the times I've had filmed this review, always something happens between my files getting corrupted and I can't recover them. It's been one hell of a roller coaster for this particular review, so I'm very glad that I finally have it done. So, for you guys, I present to you an actual review, Tale of the Body Thief. Tale of the Body Thief is the fourth book in Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, and once again we're following Lestat de Lincourt on an adventure. If you want a recap as to what has happened, I honestly am going to refer you to my previous reviews. I've done the first 3 books in the series, Interview with the Vampire Lestat, and Queen of the Damned. While they're not necessarily important to understanding this review, because this is more of an isolated story, it does help inform this review. There are going to be moments where I speak a little bit more casually and familiar with you guys, because this is the 4th review and the 4th book. So I do recommend you going checking those out. The links to those will most likely appear at the end of the video, if not somewhere with a card or something. I'm still figuring all that out. But the case in point is to get a lot of background information for what has transpired before this point in time, I recommend you to go check those reviews out. Anne Rice herself, by the way, little moment of vanity for me, Anne Rice herself actually commented and shared Interview with the Vampires review, so that happened a while ago, but I'm still just like, oh, Senpai noticed me. To give you a brief sum up, originally I was going to do this funny little sketch where I was going to be like an old-timey news reporter, but I find I can't really do the accent convincingly, and yeah. Lestat became a rock star whose music aroused a vampire goddess by the name of Akasha that set about killing the majority of the world's males and vampires with the intent of making a more peaceful world by ruling over the women and the scant males permitted in it. Lestat would be her consort and her instrument of justice, a god to her goddess. The remaining vampires, if they accepted her and her mission, would end up becoming her angels. She started with small, impoverished countries, and Lestat either stood by while she slaughtered hundreds, if not thousands, or he would directly jump into the destruction, relishing it as he gulped down innocent blood and bursts hearts in the victims' chests using his mind gift. Lots of in that. Eventually, Akasha was defeated by twin vampires Makare and Maharet, and Lestat basically continued existing on afterwards with both grief and giddiness, for the anticipation of a new adventure. He's going to get into way more trouble in the future, and he's now way more powerful than he's ever been. In this book, some time has passed. According to the Vampire Companion, the events of Queen of the Damned happened in 1985, and the book was published in 1988. The events of Tale of the Body Thief happened in 1991, and the book was published in 1992. So from 1985 to 1991, 6 years has passed in the book's actual events. In that time, Lestat has become close friends with David Talbot, a man in his 70s, a British man of wealth and sensibilities. He is the superior general of a secret and powerful occult studying society called the Telemasca. He is a very kind, strong-willed leader who is taken to his old age fairly well. He refuses time and time again Lestat's offer for the Dark Gift, which distresses Lestat because what started out as a joke and a game on his part, because he never promises that he's going to give David the gift, he just wants to hear him ask for it, it's turned serious. He loves him. And David is dying slowly right before his eyes. And over, David assures him that he's accepting of his fate, that he's okay with dying, and that while he doesn't want to die, it's not really the end of the world, right? It's normal, it's natural. And he will embrace death rather than embracing immortality. Lestat, at least towards the beginning of the book, is very melancholic. He's searching within himself for that goodness that he's always been searching for, be it kneeling in a church as a boy, or potentially being the benevolent servant of a blood-soaked goddess. Lestat ultimately wants to be a good guy. He just fails at it, or tarnishes it, what victories he does have, with making blunders. In fact, after all of the events of Queen of the Damned, the coven that had formed on Night Island had since disbanded. And he finds himself once again alone, and he's contemplating his existence. Then he starts questioning, should he just end it? Go into the light of day and kill himself? By this point, Lestat is mixed on his morality, and when it comes to vampires, they have to operate on a different set of morals than a lot of humans do, because in order to continue existing, it usually means having to kill. With Lestat in particular, once again, he has striven for some semblance of goodness. He doesn't want to be the monster, really, but because he is a monster, he has embraced it, and he's worked within its confines. He takes some pleasure, okay, a lot of pleasure, in being a vampire, but at this point in time, he can't help but question it and start to long for something else. He starts having these glorified memories of his human life, all these wonderful parts of it. And it's like with a human being looking back on their childhoods with nostalgia glasses. And he starts wondering, if he could go back to being human, would it be as good as those memories? Would he also be able to achieve some level of goodness in no longer being in the physical form of a monster, or would he still be himself? Part of what prompts these feelings is the fact that he targets the evildoer. Always has. And he's stalking this killer of women. The guy has killed several women, and Lestat knows who it is, has been watching him, and only just now intervenes. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, that basically he's a murderer himself, and saving one life just won't make good on all the ones he's taken. So when he targets this guy, he does stop him from killing this elderly woman, who was intended to be his next victim. He waits for him inside this woman's apartment, inside the shadows, and when the killer comes in and catches sight of Lestat in the other room, he freaks out and he leaves. And Lestat follows him back to his apartment, playing this awful little cat and mouse game, and he toys with him once they're at the apartment. He drinks from him and then he lets him go. He drinks from him and lets him go, like a cat playing with a mouse. And after doing that several times, he finally finishes it. And that's where it should have ended. But Lestat feels hollow from this kill. When a vampire drinks from a human being, and especially when they kill them, it is an intimacy and pleasure unparalleled. They know everything about this person. They absorb their very essence, and it is absolute. And killing this kind of loathsome guy just floods Lestat with these jumbled sentiments and his craziness and all these bad memories, and it's just bland, and he's unthinking, and all this other stuff. So he goes back to this much more interesting older woman, because he had been watching her before he went after the killer. Now, this woman he intended to save, he drinks from her until she dies. And she's more beautiful and intelligent and emotional and more satisfying. And with her death comes a sense of satisfaction, but there's also this great sadness, grief, and guilt. How can he go on knowing that no matter what he does, he will always be a monster, a killer? How could he go on with the regrets of his past just weighing down on him? He visits David in David's manor, and he tells him he intends to kill himself. He will go out into the sunlight. He's not 100% sure that this will actually kill him. I mean, he does have the blood of a goddess, after all. David tries to convince him to stay. Just stay one night. Let me talk you out of this. Let me convince you that life is worth living, that you are worth living. Basically, I love you, is what the sentiments are. But no, Lestat bids David farewell. And he goes to the Gobi Desert, where he just strips naked and he flies higher, 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 until he's right there as the sun starts rising and there's nowhere to hide. There's no backing out, and he is just blasted with sunlight. It is agony, pure agony, and he plummets from the sky to the harsh sand below and is there all day and all night. And on the second day, his body acts of its own accord and buries him deep in the sand where he's safe. When he wakes up, he is in so much pain. And after a while, he manages to fly himself to David's home, getting there near dawn and passing out on his study floor, burnt and very naked. When he wakes up, he notices that the curtains have been drawn so no sunlight can get into him, and there's this fire going, and there's clothes, brand new clothes in his own tastes, and other things to help Lestat get cleaned up and ready. And Lestat is actually very touched by this. It's a very sweet gesture. And when David comes to him, Lestat does remind him that by helping him, he's helping the devil. Now, Lestat views himself as the devil, or at least some extension of it. Not necessarily a literal sense, but definitely a metaphorical one. And he points out to David that helping an evil being could be interpreted as being evil too. But David doesn't care. He loves Lestat. Though he gets a bit frustrated with Lestat always pointing out that he is a vampire. He reminds him constantly of what he is, and that he drinks blood, and that he doesn't have to kill, but he will kill. He's actually going to go out that night and kill. He doesn't have to do it, but he enjoys killing. Now, David isn't stupid. He does know all of that, but it's kind of like an open secret between the two of them. Something that you know, but you don't really talk about for one reason or another to help kind of facilitate whatever's going on. So Lestat goes out, hunts, and comes back, and the two men have, like, this really deep conversation. They've already had, like, several, but this is a deep conversation that's very David-centered at this time. This is where he explains his backstory, at least in some part, explains why he became part of the Talamasca, and how he's coping with his fast-approaching death, and why he doesn't want to become immortal, despite Lestat practically begging him, hyping it up, and just really, just accept it, goddammit, accept it, accept me. But David won't do it. Back when David was young, he went to Brazil, specifically Rio, on a hunting trip, and there he fell in love with this young man named Carlos, and they made love, and they were so happy, and Carlos's mother was just really pissed off that David was going to be taking her son away on this hunting trip, and she just started plaguing him with spirits. At first it was like little annoyances, and then it escalated into like full-blown attacks. And there was this was one of the biggest showings of supernatural things David had ever seen in his entire life. And he went to her and he begged her to teach him how to summon spirits too. And she did. It took a lot of convincing, but she did. And he ended up becoming a psychic capable of reading minds and summoning spirits. He eventually returned to England, though very reluctantly because he had fallen in love with Rio so much, and he instantly was invited into the Talamasca, where he began to search for answers to cosmic mysteries and find an explanation for everything he had seen. But after decades in the macabre, the unnatural, he is no closer to discovering any significant answer than he was before, and so he turns to the Bible. David, we both know that book just... I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Granted, there is a reason that David specifically turns to the Bible before he... Before he had even left for Rio, he was sitting in this cafe, and he saw these two humanoid beings just sitting there. But they didn't really seem to be occupying the same space as him. No one else could see him, no one else could hear him, they were just there. What he believes is that this was God and the devil having a discussion where the devil was just begging God to let him stop being the devil because he couldn't stand being evil anymore, and God telling him he needed him to keep being evil for the sake of just some plan. And David believes that this was some sign to do something on his own. They had to have known he could hear and see them. And it was meant to prompt him to do something. But he never knew what that was. And that's another reason he joined the Talamasca. And now he'll die and he'll never know what he was meant to do or take away from that vision. Lestat actually counters this by basically saying that even if this is the god and the devil letting him see this vision, they could have just been toying with him. And mere mortals are not even meant to know what the plan actually is anyway. So it's really no big deal if he doesn't know what this purpose was. If they wanted him to actually know what to do, they would have told him outright. Or they should have. Now after this discussion, Lestat heads back to his hotel and it's near dawn, and he's startled by this knock on his door. He gave instructions not to be interrupted, and because he's got bank, you would think that nobody would disrupt him. But there's this bellhop, and he's got a packet with him that contains a short story, and Lestat's really furious about this. Now let me explain. Earlier in the story, Lestat was in Florida where the serial killer was, and after killing the killer, he's standing on this beach and he's reflecting on his actions after killing the woman. He's feeling guilty and he's just thinking about it. And then he's approached by some tall, awkward dude, a guy that's kind of lumbering and doesn't quite seem right in his skin, and this guy waves at him. Waves at him like he knows who this is. And as the guy approaches, Lestat could swear he's seen this guy before, several times, including in Italy. But how could that be? No mortal could track a vampire in such a short time, across different continents. He was in Europe, and then he's in the United States. What the hell is going on? But even Lestat's curiosity isn't going to be a match for the mood he's in right now. He is super pissed off, and he's just in no mood to deal with this guy, and it clearly shows in his face because this dude panics and drops this packet at his feet and flees. Inside this packet is a short story, and now Lestat is in a hotel in London, because, that's where David lives. Lestat is given another short story, and he's just super pissed. Not only did this guy follow him from America, but he found him in this hotel in London under a fake name. And all he's giving him are these short stories. And he glanced at them, and they're short stories about body switching. Side note, every time this mortal shows up, he feels this tight, squeezing sensation, like he's being pushed out of his body, and then he falls back into it at the last minute. He's super pissed off, and he goes into the woods outside, and he buries himself there, and he's vowing when he wakes up he's gonna find this son of a bitch and kill him. When he wakes up, he goes to Paris, and he doesn't tell a single soul where he's going. He puts himself under a different alias in this grand hotel, and for 2 nights avoids going anywhere. Instead, he reads David's private journal of his time in Rio, and of being this young adventurer. David gave it to him to help Lestat better understand him. And it makes him feel all the more close to the man, and all the more sad that soon David won't be with him. After the 2 days has passed, he goes outside early in the morning. No one is around, and he finds a bridge, and he just stands there, and he waits. And he doesn't have to wait for long, because the guy drives up. He shows up. This lumbering, tall guy that, despite his fear, approaches him, and even says his name. That partially begs the question why no one ever recognizes Lestat when he goes out. New tan in this book notwithstanding, okay? He became an international rock star. He's known to immortals and mortals alike. And I know, like in Prince Lestat and Realms of Atlantis and things like that, his celebrity is noticed. People do talk about it and things like that. But here, I know like 6 years has passed in the story time. I also know that not everyone was into that music. I'm also aware that his rock career was in the 80s when not everybody had a camera phone to like take pictures and to document shit and stalk people with. So it's kind of understandable that people would lose interest and forget what he looks like, at least not like enough to be like, oh, that guy, like right off the top of their head. But seriously, no one's ever stopped him on the street. Not one devoted groupie has ever been like, that's Lestat. I mean, maybe it's just a matter of odds. Like, how many people that really loved him would actually cross paths with him? I mean, in 6 years, there had to have been a few people that turned their heads and was like, I think that was Lestat. Anyway, the man hands him another packet, the third one, this one containing a movie. And he insists to Lestat, don't be hasty, Mr. de Lincor, don't be hasty. Because apparently this guy has an offer that Lestat cannot refuse. And he's the only one who can give it to him. And Lestat really wants to kill him. But Lestat being Lestat is curious. I mean, hell, I'd probably be curious too, let's be fair. And lets the guy drive off to wherever he's going to go. And when Lestat gets back to his hotel, a packet is on his bed, and so David is called and asked to come to Paris, sparing no expense. Lestat will transport him there, and the following evening at 8 o'clock they will share a dinner and talk. David comes, and the two sit down, they discuss these short stories in the film that were left to Lestat by the mysterious Don't Be Hasty stalker, and they find the theme, body switching and or snatching. I mean, yeah, Lestat kind of noticed that before, but he didn't really think about it. And through discussion, they figure out that the man is offering Lestat a switch. That tall, strapping, strong mortal body in exchange for Lestat's very powerful vampire body. And David outright tells him that this is a mistake to even consider it. Don't do it. As I was reading it, I was like, it's a trap. Now, I will give Lestat some credit in this. I do understand his thinking. He wants to, in some way, either be relieved for a little while of his evil, or kind of redeem his evil a little bit in some way by being placed into a body that doesn't require blood. He could also experience those nostalgic feelings of being mortal again, and the biggest one, he could see the sun for the first time in centuries. Lestat leaves David with the promise not to do anything with this mortal unless he talks to David first. He leaves David in the restaurant and goes back to his hotel room to find... not this time it's not a packet. It's a vase full of flowers and a letter from the guy, and this is where we learn his name. Regalian James. I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly, but it's here. He wants to meet up the following night in New Orleans, and Lestat sends a message along to David about this guy's name, and David is going to look into both the name and cases of body switching in the Telemaskin files. And Lestat travels back in time, so to speak, so he can arrive the night before Regalian's meeting. He flew to New Orleans under the current night he was just sharing with David, and he seeks out Louis, his beloved fledgling. Again, for more information about Louis, see the Interview with the Vampire Review. Louis lives in this little hovel in New Orleans. It's actually really telling about their characters in Lestat's description of Louis's actions and dwellings versus Lestat's actions and dwellings. Louis chooses to live in a moldy, damaged shack that is like the shed of an old, falling-apart mansion. You can't really see the mansion through all the plants and stuff, but even more obscure is this little shack that Louis lives in, and he really has very few possessions, and what he does have is mostly books and candles, and all of it is exposed in some way to decay, be it by a broken window that lets in all the elements, or by rodents running around. But case in point, Louis doesn't live in comfort. Lestat does visit him here, and he finds it, well, unpleasant. And to make his visits more pleasant, he actually brings his own chair, this really comfortable chair for himself, so he can sit in it and have conversations with Louis. It's actually kind of a nice thing. Lestat, however, lives in their old apartment where he, Louis, and Claudia used to live. And it is completely restored, and it's got all the modern stuff, like TVs and stuff hidden behind panels. And Louis, despite pretending he doesn't care for modern comforts, often goes to Lestat's place to watch movies and hang with him, so... These two are such, stubborn dorks, and I just love him. Louis won't admit he actually likes modern living because he still harbors some level of disgust and shame in what he is, and he does hold some rightful bitterness towards Lestat, despite his love for him, so his pride won't let him go back to living with Lestat. And Lestat wants to be around Louis so much that he's willing to put himself into Louis' dreadful little shack, despite absolutely hating it. He even brings his own chair, just so he can go and sit with Louis. These two, I swear to God, Oh, my murderous fanged babies, I love your complex relationship dynamics. You guys are just a hot mess. In any case, Lestat goes to Louis to discuss with him what Regalian wants, and Louis basically tells him, for that, while he might want to be human, he won't be human. He'll just be the same guy in a different body. Not to mention that it's risky to give his powerful body to an unknown dude. I mean, David echoes this later on when we find out that Regalian James was a Telemascan and used his psychic powers for personal gain in the extreme. He often caused trouble for others, be it by stealing from them, or he actually physically harmed them. So it's doubly risky because, one, Lestat, you don't actually know what it means to be human, okay? And Louis explicitly states you can't possibly actually want it. He loves being the monster. Two, Regalian James cannot be trusted. His record is against him. I mean, he was tossed out of the Telemasca for abusing his powers and hurting people, and before that, he had a huge track record of theft. So naturally, he's not the best person you want to hand your body over to. Side note, Louis is one of my favorite characters in general in all of the Vampire Chronicles and in literature at large. And I just love that he gets some juicy screen time in this book. When Lestat visits him, yeah, he gives him all those warnings, but he also talks about if he sees Regalian, he will kill him, and he advises Lestat to do the same, which Lestat won't do because he admits he wants to conduct the switch. He wants to see if it's possible, and as they talk, Lestat is genuinely shocked that Louis isn't in favor of him becoming human because, for Louis, for lack of a better term, he suffers from Catholic guilt. Louis believes that they are in a state of purgatory and should just be happy that they aren't in hell. This, of course, pisses Lestat off because he doesn't share those views. I mean, if you recall, he helped an entire coven escape living in a graveyard because they were scared of superstitions that told them that they were of the devil and that they would die if they entered a church, and thus they deserved to live in filth and amongst corpses. The only reason he puts up with it with Louis is because of his love for the guy, even though they're having a little lover spat right now. And they will have an even bigger one later on, and I can't wait to talk about that one. Louis actually also says, which I just think is a good little bit, is that Lestat wouldn't even like being human because he was born a monster. And Lestat claps back with, and I quote, "And by the way, I wasn't born a monster. I was a mortal child the same as you. Stronger than you, more will to live than you. That was cruel of you to say." And Louis actually is like, yeah, I know, it was kind of mean of me to say that you were born a monster. You weren't. Lestat ends up leaving Louis kind of hurt that Louis not on his side, and he ends up giving him this biting undercurrent accusation of how he wouldn't let anyone harm him because of Louis' concern over James finding him. Because Louis has let people harm Lestat and even helped with it by carrying Lestat's body to bury in a swamp. Their relationship is fucked up. In any case, the following night, he meets with James, and I'm calling him by his last name from now on because I really do struggle with that first name and it's awkward. So anytime now I say James, I'm referring to Regalian James. And he goes to hear him out, and he does not like this guy instantly, and he threatens him to talk fast and explain himself because, he could still end up dead, He's only being kept alive out of mere curiosity after all. How was he able to track Lestat, and what is the extent of body switching? The way James has been tracking him is by having found out several of his pseudonyms and then tracking them through different computers and stuff, like banks and the like. And he, uses deductive reasoning to kind of just figure out where Lestat would go and stuff like that. And he also uses his own psychic powers to rise up out of his body and then search for him where he thinks he might be. So the nature of the proposal is that for 1 week, though it does get negotiated down to like 1 day and 2 nights starting the upcoming Wednesday, now James claims that he will give Lestat's body back because of a sweet price of $10 million waiting for him when he returns it. And being a thief, he enjoys swindling people out of things. I mean, he's very greedy, and he can have any body he wants. So no big whoop to switching and swapping back, and he even makes it out like he's willing to negotiate in the future for longer periods of time where they can switch. Lestat will pay him, and then they'll switch bodies and stuff like that. Like, that's how he's framing this. What makes James even more scary is that he wants to be the monster, okay? He tells Lestat when prompted that he wants to do the switch because he's never stolen something as valuable as the life of another person, their very essence. As a thief, he wants the experience of drinking blood, of stealing life, and it kind of pisses Lestat off to hear his vampire existence distilled into such crude terms, and it makes James all the more unsavory to him. I mean, he does come across as this honest thief, honest in his dishonesty, but it does rub Lestat very much the wrong way. James leaves him to mull it over and to wait for Wednesday, and Lestat is just thinking about how it will be to see the sun for the first time on the streets of New Orleans, to feel the sun on his skin. But he does have his fears and doubts about whether James will come back despite his claims that money is all that he needs, and he also isn't concerned with handing his body over, knowing that James intends to be utterly cruel and savage with it. Thus, Lestat is allowing evil, but he still wants that body. He still wants to be in that mortal body. Now, he did promise to speak with David before going to James, and right then, David calls him. And this is where we actually learn about James and where he got his body. You see, he worked in an asylum as an orderly, and he switched bodies with a man that was basically driven insane from drug use, like this one-time drug binge that caused him to kill his entire family, and then he just stopped speaking and everything else. So then, he switches bodies with this guy, and he kills his elderly body that was dying from cancer with that other guy's soul inside of it. So no soul will come back to claim the body he's currently in because it went away with his old body. Pretty fucked up. And then, after he got that body, he went around to search for Lestat. And despite that one-time drug use and that mild insanity, the body was in perfect condition. Lestat basically tells David that he loves him and that he'll talk to him soon, and he ignores all of David's warnings and concern, and he hangs up. It isn't Wednesday, but Lestat does go to the stolen house that James is living in Georgetown. It's filled to the brim, by James' own admission, with nothing but stolen valuables. And Lestat scopes out the house and even stashes money in several places because, well, he might need it. He doesn't know the extent of how well he can trust James, even though he's willing to give his body to him. James isn't home, but then he meets this dog, Mojo. And the dog doesn't bark at him or bite him like dogs are wont to do in the presence of a vampire because they can sense that they're not human. And Lestat just instantly falls in love with him, and he's hugging him, and he's smelling him, and oh my god. And he keeps the dog indefinitely. He actually goes on this really, really cute tangent about Mojo. He loves this dog, and he likes mentioning him, but he's not going to do anything in the story. He actually belonged to the previous owners of the house before James took over. Funny enough, the dog hates James and growls at him no matter what body he's in. So the dog is pretty intuitive. In any case, Wednesday rolls around and James has this figured out, and he won't kill Lestat once he's human because he knows the other vampires love Lestat, and if there's a chance to save him, well, they'll try to keep both the vampire body and the mortal body alive. Maybe. It's actually a concern to Lestat later on that maybe once all the other vampires find out what's happened, they'll kill his original vampire body because, James isn't part of their circle, and he can't be trusted. James gives Lestat a passport containing a picture of the body he's about to go into, and Lestat does the same for the guy, and they switch. And the experience is strange and very intense. The way it's done is that you must will yourself absolutely into the other body. Think of nothing else but wanting to be in that body, and looking through its eyes is very important. Look through the eyes, because that means you're anchored there, and you have to make it breathe. Just go into that body and stay there. And they accomplish this. And when James gets into Lestat's body, it's kind of this, he's just staring. He's like, he can't quite control the muscles in his face, and his limbs are all floaty and flailing. And he can't quite control himself, but he walks through the glass door in the kitchen, and he flies away, all stupid and stuff. He's got this blank expression, like he's smiling, and he just floats away. And in this human body, the draft from the broken door is stinging Lestat's face and making his teeth chatter, but he's so shocked he's human. Then he starts taking kind of stock of everything, and all the world seems so utterly gloomy and dull because he's looking through human eyes, which he likens to looking through murky water. And the money he's hidden has been snatched away by James with a note saying, "Oh, I'll see you on Friday, ha ha." At first, Lestat thinks this is a game. It's not a game, bro. It's not a game. We all see where this is going. We all know where this is going, Lestat. The dude left you no keys, no money, took all of the shit out of the house. Once he starts taking stock of this, he starts noticing these things, okay? So basically, you're fucked. Not to mention the very difficulty Lestat has at being human. I mean, he goes to the bathroom for the first time in 200 plus years, and he goes to pee, and the very smell of it nearly makes this guy pass out. I mean, he kind of flails and it gets everywhere, including on his pants. And he almost kills himself by tripping on a carpet and bashing his head on a fireplace because he's not used to navigating in the dark. And he's also not used to the lack of stability, I guess. His human body is weaker and it's not as balanced like his previous body was. It is fascinating to see what a vampire thinks of being human, highlighting the differences that we know exist but never really fully comprehend, like eating. Lestat tries to eat spaghetti and it's rubbery and it's slimy and he feels it's just too tasteless, and wine doesn't compare to blood. It's thin and flavorless. Now, I have no idea what the fuck wine he's drinking, but blah, wine is just gross, and I can tell you right now it has flavor, so it's baffling to me that he just doesn't think that there's any flavor to it. And because he also hasn't eaten or drank for so long, he doesn't really understand his body's limits. So he ends up drinking 3 glasses of wine, and he gets really drunk off that to the point where he cannot walk straight. Eventually, he also gets really sick. He starts getting sick already. He's already, kind of getting there. And he doesn't really, A, know how to cope with it, like where to go for treatment and stuff, and B, is terrified of dying because this is really the only time he's going to be vulnerable enough to die. If the desert didn't do it, it would take a lot to kill him if he was a vampire. As a mortal, he just needs the flu. He goes back home, he goes to sleep, and he wakes up as the sun is coming in. This is his very first day as a mortal, and he goes exploring with Mojo by his side, and it's cold and it's biting, but it is utterly beautiful, and he hasn't seen the sunlight in centuries, and it is glorious. If only Louis could be there with him. But then he starts getting worse and worse. He's achy and cold and feverish. And he goes to his bank and he picks up money that he had transferred to himself. And thankfully, he still actually has some agents and code words, and he speaks this old-timey French, which helps him stay in contact with one of his agents in France when shit starts hitting the fan. Because, yeah, James runs off with Lestat's body and starts draining several of his accounts and killing several of his agents. Thankfully, not all of them, because that's how Lestat keeps a good amount of money for himself, so he can get around later and track James. But this very first day, despite all the inconveniences of getting sick, this is a day he will remember forever, just looking at other human beings as other human beings do, and seeing the sunlight play off of the damp pavement. It's all so lovely and wonderful, and he just absolutely loves it, and we feel good for him. Unfortunately, Lestat's illness gets the better of him, and later on in the day, very close to night, not only does he realize that James is not coming back, we already knew that, he apparently couldn't put the pieces together, he just is too sick. He wants to go to New Orleans so he can get to Louis and get his beloved fledgling to turn him into a vampire so he can have a chance at tracking James down. He ends up collapsing outside of the door at the Georgetown house he's staying at, and people call an ambulance, and he's taken to a very, very overwhelmed, overstuffed hospital where he meets Gretchen, the nurse and nun that stays with him all day and all night and promises not to leave his side. There are many people in this hospital that need care, but Gretchen has her own motives for keeping Lestat to herself. She volunteers to take him home and care for him there, and he readily goes with her, not liking being in the hospital. It's just death everywhere. It's just suffering everywhere. But Gretchen is warm and beautiful and welcoming, and he begs her to not let him die, which she does promise. Over the course of, I'm not really sure, a few weeks or so, Lestat lives with Gretchen, and under her care he becomes better. And they have a lot of deep conversations about whether God exists, and what's the meaning of life, and does it really matter if God exists? And for Gretchen, she claims that she doesn't really believe that there is a God. She did when she was younger, and she wanted to be a stigmata as a show of her devotion and her faith. If you don't know what a stigmata is, it's a person who gets the wounds of Christ, like on their wrists and their ankles, I guess, heels, whatever. They get the wounds of Christ, and they bleed continuously as a show of their devotion and love for God. It's a blessing, I guess, from God. But she doesn't, at the same time, when she starts getting older and she's seen a lot of stuff, she starts kind of doubting that God's even there. But she does have faith in the work she does, even if it's under the guise of being a devoted nun. It's just complicated. And that's what I like about her. She's actually a very interesting character, and I kind of wish that she came back. Just see where she's at. See, when she was younger, she actually made a deal with God that should he save her mother from dying of cancer, she would devote her life to him and to making the world a better place, and would never play the piano again. She offers him like a bargain, saying, I'll give up this thing I love if only you save somebody I love, and then also, on top of that, I'll do really good things. Now, for her, the piano was actually something that she really, really loved deeply, and she was a prodigy, and her siblings had to forego all kinds of things just so they can afford to give her lessons, pay for competitions, and so forth. But for her personally, she came to realize that she could do more good for the world by becoming a nurse than by playing the piano. And plus, she had a promise to keep to God because her mother didn't die. Now, Lestat is actually bothered by this. Lestat counters this with the notion that suffering has always existed. No matter how many people she heals in the deep jungles of South America, there will always be death, regardless of what she does. And ultimately, she will die unknown like so many, billions of people, and nothing she has ever done will matter because suffering continues with or without her, and if she had become a professional musician, her music would outlive her and continue bringing goodness to the world in that way. And music and performance and art at length are their own forms of goodness. Plus, dedicating yourself to a god that may or may not even exist seems kinda silly to him. You live this one life, and you should strive to do things that make you happy. Especially since God doesn't really make his plans known to mere mortals if he does in fact exist. And all of that is a very interesting discussion. I really enjoyed reading about that. It kind of got a little wordy here and there, but it was still really interesting. And Gretchen insists that all of her small deeds, no matter if suffering still exists, is still worth doing. Even more so than bringing joy to someone's spirits with her music. She believes in doing the tangible and helping someone's health and well-being as her form of goodness, even if that costs her her own happiness. And Lestat is sad because she's seemingly wasting her life. They also talk about Lestat himself and the nature of good and evil, and Lestat tries several times, though he knows that her listening to him is just humoring him, that he is a monster, that he kills to survive, and that this mortal frame is not his own form. And despite the fact that he has to kill to survive, he wants that old body back. He wants it despite, and maybe even because, there is evil attached to it. He just doesn't want to die, and he especially does not want to die in a body not his own. Big change from the melancholy from the beginning of the book, and it only took a couple of weeks in the body of a human being. Gretchen doesn't believe him, obviously, that he's like some monster switched bodies with a mortal, but it doesn't matter. The two of them like each other, and they respect each other, and Lestat falls in love with her. She wants him to come with her to aid the sick and dedicate his life to that form of goodness. And he says that, no, I'm going to leave and search for my body, and when I do find it, he will come back to her and prove to her that he wasn't lying. Because he wants her. He wants her to choose to be a part of his life and to live forever with him. She's so good and beautiful and strong that he thinks she can survive the madness that typically comes with vampires revealing themselves to mortals. Because mortals have a hard time dealing with them and the concepts surrounding them. Side note, remember the time I mentioned that Gretchen had her own reasons for taking Lestat home with her? He was handsome, and she felt sympathy for him, and she wanted to get rid of her virginity. She's about 40, and she has never, as she puts it, known a man. She has dedicated herself to God and her work, and only recently, as her age hit her, she decided that she needed to know a man. It was a distraction for her to not know what sex felt like, to not know what it was like to be loved by a man. And so she leaves the hospital in the jungle that she was working at, and she leaves these sick and hurt kids because she was distracted and she wanted to deal with that distraction. And remember when I said that Lestat basically felt disgusted that he violated the waitress? Well, he learns from that. And he makes love to Gretchen with full understanding, respect, and consent on both ends. And he actually comments on how sex, as beautiful as it is limited. This is another difference between vampires and human beings. Like everything human, it is limited, and it doesn't last very long. And unlike drinking someone's blood and taking their very memories and soul into your own body, it's very localized to mostly your genitals. When you drink blood, it goes everywhere. It fills you up completely and pleasures you. And sex, while enjoyable, and he does try to seduce David later on so that they can have this one experience together, it's just not as good as blood drinking. Once he's better, though, he does leave Gretchen and he goes to New Orleans and he goes to find Louis in this little shack, and just sexy, badass, aggressive Louis is just... I legit giggled and gasped the first time I read the section where Lestat goes to him in his human body. It's dark, and Lestat has Mojo with him, and he's cold, and he's tired, and he's sitting in his special seat waiting for Louis, and fucking Louis comes out of nowhere, grabs him, throws him on the ground, and proceeds to step on his neck, and very slowly starts pushing down. I mean, whew. Is it hot in here, or is it just him? It takes all of Lestat's effort to just get out. Lestat! And let Louis know that it's him. Louis, though in shock, listens to everything. Listens to Lestat's woes and his ups and downs, his love for Gretchen, his hate of being mortal, his near death, his betrayal by James, the sunlight for the first time in years, and when Lestat asks him to give him the dark gift and make him immortal, he refuses. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but Louis has basically never wanted to make another vampire after Claudia and Madeline. Ever. It's like the one thing he really just does not want to do, even for somebody that he loves. He does not want to bring more people into this, even though eventually he does find peace with what he is. He tries to dissuade people from choosing if they have a choice. And with Lestat, it is because he thinks he's doing the right thing. He claims that he could have a good life with Gretchen and work off his sin by saving the innocent with her. And he gains sunlight, for fuck's sake. And he refuses several times to help Lestat, even with Lestat begging him, even with Lestat kissing him and whispering sweetly in his ear. And he physically pushes Lestat away. And he uses supernatural speed, fleeing, saying that maybe in time the others will forgive Lestat of his stupidity and help him. But Louis will never make another vampire, even if it's him. Lestat is so hurt by this, so enraged, he starts bawling, and then he proceeds to use Louis' stash of candles and matches to set fire to the little shack. He knows why Louis said no, but he hates that the choice was taken away from him. Like when he was made into a vampire and he didn't get a choice. And now he wants to be a vampire again, and his own fledgling won't turn him, and he makes the choice for him that no matter how much Lestat begs, he won't get what he wants. And so he basically acts petty and gets some revenge on the man by burning his little house. While this is going on, Lestat looks off to the side, and amongst the smoke he sees a figure. It's Marius. Marius, his dear, dear Marius that loved him so much and is almost a father figure in his kindness and his openness to Lestat, and there he is. But he is wearing a look of pure rage, and Lestat knows he is meant to see it, and he's meant to see Marius's disgust and fury, and to know that it's because he made such a stupid choice. And then Marius is gone, and Lestat is left to plead, hoping that the man will hear him. Please don't destroy my body before I have a chance to claim it again. Please, give me time, Marius, please. Because the others might very well go after and destroy James, even if he's in Lestat's body. He isn't one of them, and he's reckless, and he's stupid, and risks exposing them all with his sloppy murder sprees, which I'll get to. And in one of the most, if not the most powerful bodies to exist, no less. They might very well destroy that body and James within it if Lestat doesn't get to it first. So now it's a race against time. He needs to track James, and he starts by going to his New York apartment and pretends to be some cousin or other of that charming Mr. Lestat de Lincourt, who never charges rent to the elderly woman on the first floor, and he gains access to the apartment, but it's already broken into.